So one of the first policies that that would be good to adopt as a business is to invest in hybrid expenses. The Work Trend Index study that Microsoft performed alongside the IDC showed that employers had invested in additional marketing, in additional sales resources, but not necessarily in hybrid expenses. And what are these expenses? Well, think about things like devices for my employees. Think about things like VPN connections. Think about things like endpoint protection. Things like tools to allow remote collaboration. If employees are not provided with the right tools to perform their jobs, they'll find the tools anyway, but they'll choose the tools that are available to them. These may be subpar tools, or they may be tools that are simply good, but not managed by my IT department. This all leads to increased risk. Really, especially if I'm having employees work from home networks or from public networks, these are easier target for cyber threats. So it's important for me to understand what my workers need in this new hybrid world. And if, say, I'm saving an office space, reinvest that amount that I'm saving into technologies such as video conferencing equipment, device management and security, etc., etc. By equipping our workers and having policies that support equipping workers the tools they need to contribute, that's how we'll find that productivity continues remaining the same or actually increasing in a hybrid work environment. What's interesting is that many of these tools may already be at your disposal. And when we start talking about specific tools, we'll delve a bit deeper into that. An additional useful policy is to rethink employee roles, the risks they present, and mitigations. Now, it's true that there are clear and measurable benefits to hybrid. We saw that in the first half of this webinar. But it's also true that it introduces new dangers. Say a lost device that someone may grab and access corporate data on, a compromised home network that may lead to my employee's identity being leaked, a shared personal device that my employee shares with a child or with a spouse that is being used for work and contains corporate data that maybe someone else can access. All of these are potential risks of a hybrid work strategy. So it's important for me to understand this and to start mapping out my employees and assigning risks to them. What does that mean? Well, there are roles that are simply not going to be right for hybrid. We already mentioned, for instance, the role of a custodian. And so these employees don't present any hybrid risk. There may be other security risks to consider, but not in the hybrid strategy. Meanwhile, other roles may be able to be performed in a hybrid model, but they will present different levels of risk. It's less risky, for instance, to have a sales rep's identity be compromised than it is to have a CEO's identity be compromised. So it's important that my HR and IT teams understand the different roles, they map them out to employee personas and assign risks to these different personas, because these different personas will then allow me to understand the mitigation capabilities. Maybe for a sales rep, it's enough for me to simply deploy endpoint management policies and tools. And so I'll say you can use personal devices for work, but they have to be registered with my endpoint manager. Or you cannot use personal devices for work. You have to use this corporate assigned device. And that will allow me to deploy policies, rules, restrictions to control how employees use corporate data on those devices and minimize the risk of, say, a lost device, because I can simply remote wipe it or simply remove the corporate data while leaving the personal data untouched. Similarly, I may understand then that a CEO's identity or an IT administrator's identity presents a larger risk. And maybe for that particular type of role and for that particular type of risk profile, I want to deploy additional tools such as privileged identity management or conditional access within Azure Active Directory, tools which we'll discuss a bit further as we start talking about, well, tools rather than policies. But understanding the risks that each of my employee personas presents and the mitigations, something that I should already be doing really for my traditional in-office work, can then be extended to this new hybrid reality to be able to have a secure hybrid work policy. Now, a large part of understanding this risk, of understanding the roles, and of deploying mitigations may be adopting a digital first culture. And what do I mean by that? Well, what we mean by that is understanding that we don't need to mirror the legacy or traditional processes of the past. We talked before about approvals for overtime or for leave requests. And typically when we talk about digitizing these approvals, the first thought is, well, I used to use a pen and paper. Well, how about I use a PDF now? It's still a paper. It's a digital paper, but it's still a paper. That's not a digital first mindset, right? And it's not a failure of our business. The truth is we can't imagine a color we've never seen. This is one of my quotables. It's how do you explain red to a person who's been blind from birth? So if what we know is the legacy business processes, really when we look at new ways to do things, we're going to think of legacy ways of doing things. But the hybrid work shift is a good opportunity for me to start rebuilding this way of thinking. And for instance, when I look at this approvals process for overtime, maybe I can simply use Microsoft Flow tied to an Excel worksheet or to a SharePoint list. Maybe I can build a Power App where employees can automatically fill out a request form, whether it's for overtime, for leave, and that request form automatically looks at the employee's profile and sees who the employee supervisor is, and so it sends the approval to that supervisor. And if the supervisor has an out of office in their Outlook calendar, which the tool can also see because it's also connected to Outlook, then it sends it to a second approver, and then that approver can approve or deny the request. That approval or denial is then sent back to the employee to know what happened. No PDFs, no papers, completely digital, running on things like SharePoint lists or SQL Server databases. In fact, we can even connect this solution to third-party tools to be able to, say, read my sick and vacation balances from my ERP software. This is a digital-first way of doing business. And redesigning these legacy processes and adopting this digital-first culture can help mitigate risk. Because, for instance, if my HR officer used to take home a stack of leave requests to review, approve, or deny, and he maybe lost the paper, and that paper had an employee social security number, then a single paper lost is a very, very big breach of sensitive information. However, if this is replaced by a digital tool, then what's the worst that could happen? The employee loses the cell phone, I remote wipe it, or I simply lock the account, and nothing is lost. No breach there's no breach to have, right? So building a digital first culture is very, very important to being able to secure how my business operates in this new hybrid reality. Now, an additional policy to watch for or an additional policy that we need to make sure to implement is to watch for employee burnout. And you may have seen Office 365 start to deploy and highlight tools such as workplace insights, tools that help you understand how your employees are working, that help employees understand how they are working. And it's because of this employee burnout. The Work Trend Insight, the Work Trend Index survey revealed insights into how employees are working. And in fact, 1 in 5 survey respondents felt their employer doesn't care about their work-life balance. 54% felt overworked, 39% felt exhausted. And it's because as the pandemic has increased, this same study revealed that the amount of meetings, chats, emails answered by employees has continuously increased, and the response time to these has continuously decreased. Surveys showed that even employees that were out of office or during non-work hours, such as weekend, would respond to chats and emails. And so what we find is that although digital does a very, very good job of bridging this physical gap that we can't where we can't be in the same place, maybe with our customers or other employees because of lockdowns or restrictions, that same closeness that digital brings may be a challenge for our employees if we don't keep it under control. And so it's important for us as business leaders to address digital exhaustion, to consider employee workloads and find ways to reduce those workloads. And some businesses, for instance, have adopted policies of no meeting Fridays, or ensuring that there is at least a 30-minute gap between two meetings. These policies help ensure that though we are remaining productive, that employees do have the tools to work from a hybrid standpoint and in a hybrid manner. We are not creating a culture where we are overworking our employees. At the end of the day, if we do have employee burnout, there will be a breaking point where productivity will start to dip. And so it's important for us to create a culture where there is a healthy understanding and respect for a good work-life balance. And finally, another good policy is to leverage partners and services. Really, the world of digital makes it easy for us to bridge physical gaps. This means that we may now be able and be ready to work with partners that aren't necessarily physically next to me. This opens my business to the possibility of additional specialists and very powerful and valuable allies that I can bring in my shift to hybrid, whether that's a partner that can help my organization in creating and implementing the specific HR policies, or whether it's a partner that can give me the tech consulting as I start to build those policies. And so partners such as Inova Solutions, NetPro, Solvex, etc., can help your organization to understand which of these policies apply to you, how they would apply to you, and the tools that you can use to not just have the policies from an HR standpoint, but be able to implement them from a tech standpoint.